Welcome to Internally Guided Life, a podcast to help you unlock a life of balance, fulfillment, and joy. I'm Kayla Sweet, and together we're going to have fun and create change from the inside out. I'm so glad you're here.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back. Today we have an incredible guest. We are breaking new ground on the Internally Guided Life podcast today because I actually have one of my coaching clients joining us today. She recently completed the Burnout to Balance program, and her experience, her story, the way that she just took full advantage of not just the coaching and not just the material, but her own like inner knowing and her faith and her grace, and just fully leaned in. It was so inspirational. I had to ask her to come join, and she said yes, and she's here with us today. So before we introduce her, I just want to give a little context to what this program is. I have a lot of different ways I offer coaching. There's a lot of different sizes of the packages and different experiences I bring people through, but Burnout to Balance is my favorite. It's a 12-week container that we really focus on inner healing, mastering our relationships, and connecting with passion and purpose, all for the intention of really loving ourselves and aligning our lives with what matters, especially after heavy stress and burnout. So this is a very intentional program. It's a combination of coaching and learning experience. So there's a very in-depth learning platform that you can follow along as you go through the coaching to kind of keep you grounded in some material. And it's not for the faint of heart. Emerald will be able to tell you that this has a lot, a lot going on in it, and it goes at a fast pace, and she just took it in stride. So with that, welcome to the show, Emerald. Thank you for coming on today. I am so excited to have you here. Before we dig into your experience and just you and your life, would you like to give a brief introduction to all the listeners, letting them know who you are and what you do in the world?
Sure. Hi guys. My name is Emerald Hawkins. I am a chemist, and I got my degree from Virginia Tech and just fell in love with chemistry and, learning how the world works on a molecular level. So, my day-to-day is research and development, product design. So we get to develop really cool products that save lives, military, police force, production companies all around the world, you name it. So it's a really, really cool opportunity, a really cool research and development job. And, just a little bit about me personally. I married, have 3 fur babies, 2 cats, and a dog. And family is everything to me, as I'm sure we'll talk about through this podcast. But yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
Welcome again. I'm so excited to just like have some time to reflect on the experience that you had, and honestly to just hang out with you for a little more time. I've missed you since you graduated, so this is very special for me to have you on the show today. I guess to get started, I really want to talk about what brought you into coaching? This is something that some people go their whole lives without ever interacting with, and other people are like lifers and they are constantly in coaching once they've experienced it, and then everything in between. So, what were some of the things that were going on in your life that inspired you to look into coaching, or just the things that were going on before you joined the program? Give us a little context.
So when I joined the program, I was really struggling primarily at work. I was really struggling with setting boundaries. I was really struggling with just being exhausted all the time, whether it was personal life, whether it was, I serve at my church. So whether it was doing stuff like that, whether it was working, I was just exhausted all the time. And I reached a point where I looked at myself and it was kind of ugly, to be completely honest with you. I reflect on some of the personality traits, or not personality traits, but some of the actions and just things that I had either done or said, or, reactions to things that I just didn't like. So, a very dear friend of mine encouraged me to look into life coaching, and I did. And, when I found Kayla's program, for me, it seems like a perfect fit because I was able to, it was really structured, which I was in a point in my life where I didn't have a lot of structure. It was like working on an R&D project. A lot of times you're creating the structure, and then at home we were renovating a house from top to bottom, so I didn't have any structure at home. And my husband is police department, so his schedule's all over the place, so we didn't have any structure there either. So I think ultimately I looked in the mirror and was very unhappy with how I saw myself, and I was seeking clarity and structure. So
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard thing to do though. Just the looking in the mirror and thinking, okay, what approach can I take? Not everybody does that. A lot of us, myself included, would perpetuate patterns that aren't super healthy for a while before taking that step. So what was the thing that made you decide to like take the leap? This is your first time coaching, so it is a leap of faith in a lot of ways to like lean into a new modality, a program with someone you'd never met. What was the thing that made you know this was the right thing for you and the right time for you?
I think it was one of those situations where like I knew where I wanted to be, but I didn't know how to get there. Like I had this idea, like I'm looking at myself and I'm reflecting about like who I am right now. And I know who I want to be, and I know like what I ultimately want for my family, like my future family, because we eventually want kids. Like I know kind of like what kind of mom I want to be, what type of wife I want to be, what type of daughter I want to be, what type of employee I want to be, all of those things. And I was looking at that, and I just was so burnt out that I really didn't know how to get there and how to start having those healthy relationships with not only like other people, but having a healthy relationship with myself. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about this later, but the biggest thing that I learned about myself through this whole program is I had zero relationship with self-care. And it turns out that all of the other issues that I didn't like about myself were stemming directly from my lack of relationship with self-care. Um, so one of the things that I've absolutely adored about this program is that it not only addresses like, life, it addresses life with all caps. It addresses you as a person. It addresses you and your relationships, whether that's, family, whether that's work, whether that's friends. Like there is structure to it, but you can also focus on the things that work, that are most important to you. And then you also talk about like how are you going to implement some of these things as you leave the program. And I think that's extremely valuable. Because, like I said, the biggest issue that I had was the how to. And this program really gave me a lot of tools and resources and thought patterns and just different things like that that helped me complete the how to, or work through the how to. I'm not going to say complete because
It's
work ain't
ongoing.
done, but the work ain't done, but it gives you an entire tool bag to use on a daily basis to ultimately allow you to have the life that you want to live and that you ultimately deserve to live.
Yeah, it's so hard to do that though when you're tired. So I just have to like I can't say enough how important it is to acknowledge like the work that you were willing to put in for yourself amidst the exhaustion because you were really tired. Like when we first started working together, and I've been there, like that's the reason this is so important to me because I've experienced it. It's the worst. Don't recommend if anyone's never been burned out, like just don't.
Just don't
But
get there. Don't get
but
there.
it's so hard. It's so hard to start from a place of, really having nothing to give and then finding the resources somewhere to pour into yourself in this way. And you did it and you showed up for yourself in such a phenomenal way. So it's been such an honor for me to watch and witness your experience. But I'm curious if you had any like fears or hesitations before we got started. Like, were you nervous about anything or did you have any misconceptions about what it was going to be like?
I think like I would want to say yes, but I think for me, just with my personality, I'm very much like an all-in kind of person. Like if I'm gonna do it, then I'm gonna fully commit to it. And I've always been that way. That's just something about me that's just always been there. But, I think I was more nervous. I wouldn't say scared or like concerned. I think I was just nervous because wanted to I wanted to make sure that I did give it everything that I possibly could and that I was truly honest with myself. And that's something that's really hard to do. Like, it's a lot harder to really sit down and think about. Like, I had already knew that there were certain things that I was not happy about myself. But it gets harder when there are things that you didn't think were an issue that ended up really like kind of taking over your entire life and how you function that are probably not the healthiest habits to have for the future that a lot of people want. Because a lot of people want a life that feels freeing. Even though you have responsibilities, you still want to be able to feel free in a lot of those responsibilities. But the truth is that a lot of times it's the decisions that you make and, some of the things that you do to yourself to
Yeah.
trap yourself from preventing you to live that kind of life. So, for me, I think it was a lot of nerves because I didn't want to disappoint myself. I didn't want to disappoint my family. I didn't want to disappoint my job. Like I was nervous that I wasn't going to achieve where I wanted to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big ask of yourself too to be like, well, I have nothing left to give, but here we go, 12 weeks of his super intensive personal reflection with no energy to commit to it. It's definitely, yeah, not for the faint of heart. I would be curious to hear, I know you mentioned before, like there were some key like moments, key discoveries, maybe things that you didn't think were an issue that like were illuminated as we kind of worked through the program. What were some of the most significant moments for you or like ahas or turning points that you felt stuff start to shift?
Well, you hit me hard on the first week when
I
I
know.
didn't know what self-care was.
We go in right from the beginning.
Hit with a self-care bus in a really good way. Yeah, I mean, I think like I knew I didn't really have a relationship with self-care, but I don't think I realized it took me a really long time to recognize that self-care is not selfish.
Mm.
And that was a huge turning point for me. And like in the program, I didn't get there until like halfway through Relational Mastery. Like it took me half of the program to get to the point where self-care was no longer selfish to me. And it took me a long time for me to realize that that was the issue with self-care. Because for starters, it was like, oh, like I just don't have time, or like that's just not a priority, or like, it was all of these excuses as to why I'm not worthy of, taking care of myself. So I think that was a big turning point for me. And I think around the same time was also when I realized that vulnerability is not what people think it is. And I actually sucked at it. I thought I was really good at being vulnerable, but being vulnerable is not what most people think it is. So just working through that, working through boundary setting. I thought, because I was really bad at it for a long time. And then, I started working through it. I started trying to be better at it. And I did come, quite a ways with that, but I was still missing the follow through on setting boundaries. So that was another good turning point for me, where setting boundaries and self-care and just all of those things are more important to me. Like, I had never taken a mental health day. Like, I had never taken a day off of work, and I have plenty of vacation and personal time. And I have had never, until after I started this program and recognized that it's important for me to take a break, taken a mental health day. And I've been at my job for 5.5 years. So that was huge. Like, taking a mental health day, because I was like, I need a break. I need a break from life. So, that was huge.
Yeah, it's funny like hearing you recollect some of these moments because I remember like a shift somewhere, yeah, probably halfway, maybe even a little past halfway, where like even the way you talked about yourself and your work and your situations and your worth, like it suddenly flipped. Like it was night and day, and you weren't doing the old stuff the old way anymore. And I can't take any responsibility for it because like it was all you. There was just something that happened in your reflection and your journaling and your like getting to know yourself better that allowed you to see what you really deserved and wanted and needed. And it was absolutely beautiful to witness. I guess throughout all of that, were there any specific goals that you were able to set, and how did you like work towards those? Are those still evolving? I know you mentioned your house was in disarray. I would love to talk about the house a little bit because that was such a big part of your life during the program. Yeah, what were some of your ambitions and goals coming in, and how did that evolve through the program?
So I think like one of my biggest ambitions and goals was that ultimately I really wanted to invest in myself. Like, I wanted to make myself a priority, not only professionally but personally, and make myself better for my family. So that was like a big goal for me, was to figure out how to create balance in my life, because I had zero. And yeah, like survive the renovation while also living with my parents. My husband and I lived with my parents for about 8 months doing the renovation in total. And yeah, I think it was just setting realistic goals too, tangible goals, was really important.
Are you taking this call from your new house?
Yes, I
Yeah,
am.
this
So
is
I
our
am in
first time.
my craft room right now. It is an absolute disaster, but we're working on getting some shelves and that kind of thing. So yeah, so this is it's funny because all the times that I've met with Kayla prior to this, I've either been at my work because I decided to stay late because it was quiet and I didn't have to worry about, I could close my office door and just 100% be completely vulnerable and authentic with Kayla. And, or I was sitting on the floor in my parents' house in the room that we were staying in because I was disgusting from working at the house, and we had to reschedule for a random Saturday because I was dealing with like electrical work at our house. And So I sat on the floor.
Yeah, this is my first time talking to you since you've been in the house, because that all kind of came to fruition where the house was complete just as you were graduating. And I think the timing was so perfect that you're in your own space now. So it's cool to have this moment where we're able to have this conversation from your own space, where that's been such a big part of your self-care too, is like creating space for yourself in your life. And I think
Yeah.
your home is a
Uh,
beautiful place for that.
Yeah, I think the biggest goal that I have to think about and appreciate was the taking 15 minutes every day for myself, whether it was reading my Kindle, whether it was scrolling on my phone and Pinterest, because I like to look at home improvement stuff even though I was living in it. And just or like playing a game or whatever, just taking that 15 minutes to myself to just relax on all the chaos. And I need to start doing that again because I have really, really slacked on that. But that honestly, like having that goal and actually meeting that goal on a daily basis was extremely helpful. And I think that that is really what had such a significant impact on changing my relationship with self-care too.
Yeah, because it doesn't have to be like this big show, this big dramatic thing. It doesn't have to cost any money. Like it's just the time that we're spending that's not like for anyone but ourselves. And it can be little slivers. And I think we underestimate how powerful those little pieces of time to ourselves really are. We think like, oh, we can just work through this lunch or like just keep pushing. Like you check something off the list, you go straight to the next thing. But there's so much power in like prioritizing yourself even in little time chunks throughout the day.
Oh, absolutely. And like, I think that that's probably like that for me was like the biggest misconception about self-care is that when you Google like self-care, like the first thing that pops up is the like self-care routine where you do like your night routine with all the serums and all the different things people put on their face, and they do face masks, and they put they wear like the little headband thing. It's like a whole thing.
The cucumbers
But
on the eyes
yeah, the
and yeah.
cucumbers on the eyes, it's like a whole process, right? But what I love most, and I think that I've learned to love most about self-care, is that if you really take the time to learn what it is, it's about you. It's not about what people think you should do for self-care. It's about what is going to feed you. You get to decide what your self-care routine looks like. And I think that is what makes self-care so beautiful. Once you understand what it is. Um, you can really tailor it to your lifestyle. You can tailor it to what your goals are and what you ultimately want to experience for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like this gift to yourself and this understanding of yourself where you're constantly getting to renegotiate what it looks like and what it means. And what's going to fill me up on one day is not the same thing it's going to fill me up on another day, and like being able to constantly go back to the table and rethink what it's going to look like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, if anybody can get past like the secular definition of what self-care is and actually like learn and dive into what it actually means, the world would be a much better place.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually just had
Much better
someone on
place.
the podcast not that long ago, and she corrected me when I called it self-care, and she said it's soul care. And I was like, yeah, it
I
is.
love
I
that.
love that. I know.
I love that. She knows what's up.
Uh-huh. It's like such a beautiful, because it's so much deeper than the surface level. Like it's cultivating this really loving relationship with yourself and your needs and the people around you and the things that matter most in your life. Like it's so much more than just the face masks and the spa days. So I know you've mentioned that there were a lot of like kind of pivotal moments, and you've really been able to redefine your relationship with self-care. Were there any particular like exercises or practices or lessons that stood out to you that like were just really useful that we could share with the listeners?
Oh, well, you know that I have a laundry list of those. Um, well, honestly, like I think the thought methods were really helpful. Just the way that they kind of work is that it's kind of like one, you got to take a break, which is good.
Yep.
And then you just got to figure out, like, I still have to a certain degree, like an issue with being in control, which I'm sure some of your listeners have that
Yes.
same problem. Um, so, just like readjusting my thought process around control and like pretty much like adjusting my thoughts around the situation that I can't control was really beneficial. Like, for example, something goes down and you're not happy about it, and you just kind of have to deal with it because it impacts you, but you don't have control over the situation. You got to kind of just focus on, okay, I don't have control over this. I cannot fix it. So how can I adjust my thoughts to where I'm not thinking of it so negatively? Because the other exercise, well, it wasn't really like an exercise, it was like a creative decision, I guess, that I made. Was when we were doing the personality test, because I had never actually taken that before. I've taken all sorts of other like spiritual gifts tests and like all of these other kinds of stuff, but I'd never actually taken the personality test. So I did that. And then I spent some time I was placed in two different sections, and I'm trying to pull up what mine were so that we have them.
Yeah, and we used the Enneagram personality, which is like one of my favorite ways for like self-reflection and for growth, because there's so many personality tests out there that just give you like this is who you are, like cookie cutter kind of thing, and the Enneagram is not that way. It's like these are your deepest fears, these are the things you want most, this is what drives you, and this is how you can like grow and develop and connect with the things that are going to fill you up, and I love that.
Yeah, so I ended up in a position where I had three different descriptions of myself because I was either, oh gosh, I don't remember which like numbers I actually was, but it was the individualist, the professional, and then the aristocrat is right in the middle of the two. So it depends on like the wings. And I spent some time looking at all three of those different ones and writing down which attributes on the Enneagram website would describe myself. And then I put them in a Venn diagram to see where they crossed over so that I could figure out what the major core driving force for my personality type was. And it turned out, this is going to be really funny because I just did this really anal evaluation of my personality, that the drive to discover who I am is the center of all three of those particular personality types. And it's they specifically said a relentless drive to discover more. So
Explains a lot.
yeah, it says a lot about why I'm in this program, and the Venn diagram detailed rabbit hole I went down to figure out my personality. But if I will say that paired with like some of the thought exercises and the journaling, those things for me were the most beneficial by far. Like, I think taking the Enneagram and really sitting down and spending time with it and figuring out like it, because it not only tells you the positive things about your personality type, it also tells you like the not so great things about your personality type and the things that you're probably most afraid of. And now I'm not saying that it's perfect. Like, it's not perfect. It's not going to tell you absolutely everything about you as a person. But, like for me, it talked about like fear that I'm flawed or feeling unusual or kind of, I've always kind of felt like an outsider, especially when I was in high school because, I just didn't have like a clique or, you know, I have this really strong desire to connect with others, but I don't always do it in the right way. My core values are like authenticity. I tend to avoid trends, which is very true. I still like to wear clothes that I liked to wear when I was in high school because I don't necessarily dress to meet social, like the social, whatever people are wearing nowadays. I also just kind of noticed that I have a huge fear of failure. Which is another thing that like the fear of failure is honestly what drove me 85% of the time and what drove me to burnout.
Yeah.
And just kind of sitting down and really, really focusing on myself and figuring out, oh wow, like this explains a lot. And it really helped me recognize those things. Like I said, I said before that there were a bunch of things that I didn't realize were an issue until I realized they were an issue. Yeah. So the Enneagram really helped with that. And it really made me take the time to reflect on myself and choose like these are the things that I relate to, that I feel like I do, that I don't want to be like. I don't want to let them control my life. Now, I'm not perfect. So, of course, I'm still going to have this fear of failure. Like, it's always going to be there. I felt it very heavily last week. But at the same time, recognizing them and feeling those feelings is okay. And it's healthy to do that. What's not so healthy, like, you have to figure out how you want to handle them in a healthy way. Which is why I think some of these journaling exercises and thought exercises and things like that are really, really helpful. Really helpful.
Yeah, I have to highly recommend the Venn diagram assignment. And I also loved this so much because it was the first time that you like self-created like a practice in the program where it was like, I'm okay, throwing the rule book out the window, which I always encourage people to do because you are the expert of you, but not everyone takes me up on it. So being like, okay, this is what I need to do for me. This is how I'm gonna dig in. And also like very much the scientist in you, like the analyzer of yourself. Like you got to turn that lens into your self-reflection, which I loved. And you referred back to it, throughout the program after that. And it helped you put context to things as they came up even later, like, oh, well, that actually makes a lot of sense given, some of these other things. So
Well,
yeah.
it's hanging in my office. Like I have it printed out in my office. To just remind me of some of those things. And honestly, it's a friendly reminder for me that like I am worthy. Like even though I'm all of those things, like I'm worthy because I'm all of those things.
Yeah.
And it reminds me that like when I start feeling that way, it's like friendly reminder, you're like that. So remember that you can address that. You can keep it not under wraps, but you can you can feel those things without being unhealthy about it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, without kind of going into self-destructive or relationally destructive types of, outbursts or behaviors, which we've all done that. I've had my fair share of negative responses to stress. But I think your relationship to emotions changed too. And I heard you say like, you have to like feel it, but then like in a healthy way. Would you want to speak a little bit to what that was like? Like I remember when I introduced this topic, like, okay, we're gonna talk about emotions. You've made a lot of
great.
progress.
Awesome. I love talking about my feelings. No. I actually I feel like I was a lot more open to it than I anticipated that I would be by the time we got there, to be completely honest with you.
We laid the
Um,
groundwork.
we laid a very strong foundation. But I think for me, like handling my emotions in a healthy way, it started with journaling.
Mhm.
It started with like just getting it out there and allowing myself to feel things. I inherently really struggled with joy. Like I struggled. I It wasn't even in my vocabulary, struggled with joy. And that sounds really funny, but like anger, I lived in that. I lived in things like anger. I lived in things like sadness, and my personality type leans usually in the negative personality, any negative emotions, anyways. But, I think what really helped me kind of learn how to feel emotions in a healthy way is like, I didn't realize how much I shut down my emotions. Like, I like almost numb, like didn't feel things. You know, I would only really cry when I was like completely stressed and overwhelmed. It was never like a like sadness cry. It was usually a stressed out anxiety cry. Um and for me, it's just like I needed to flip how I was handling my emotions. I needed to prioritize the positive emotions while still feeling the negative emotions, but not letting them take over. And that was the
Mm.
part that was really challenging. So, what I did to kind of combat that is I allowed myself to, instead of not allowing myself to feel joy like I used to, I allowed myself to feel things like joy and compassion and empathy, which are all things that I shut down because, I had a very traumatic incident when I was in college, and it flipped a switch in my brain, and I completely shut down. And I functioned like that. I graduated in 2019. So this situation happened in 2018. I was shut down emotionally since like 2018. So that's a
Mm.
long time to like numb all of that. Because if you numb one emotion, you numb all of them.
Yep.
Hey, Kayla. Um, so the biggest thing for me was just not, I needed to allow myself to feel the positive ones so that it also helped because if you're feeling the negative ones, and not the positive ones, you're gonna feel the negative ones so much more intensely than you would feel the positive ones, and then vice versa. So I was like, okay, well then why don't I just start feeling the positive emotions more, and then I won't feel the negative ones as much. But then I was like, okay, well, there's balance there. So once you start like opening yourself up to these positive emotions, you're still going to feel the negative emotions, but you're going to be able to interact with them and feel them in a much healthier way because you're opening yourself up to the happiness and to the joy and to the compassion and to the empathy and like all of those honestly, those really, really good things in life
Yeah.
that I was missing out on for so long.
Mm.
So long. And I'm like so grateful that I took this leap and did this burnout to balance challenge and curriculum, because it's like I wouldn't have so I wouldn't have joy if I
Mm.
hadn't gone through this program. I wouldn't have There are so many things that I wouldn't have if I hadn't done this.
Mm. I'm so glad that you shared about your experience with joy. I was hoping you would, but I wasn't gonna like plant the seed. But the truth is that joy is like one of the most vulnerable things to feel. I mean, it's trust, it's free fall, it's like waiting for the rug to be pulled out in some ways, because to feel that much joy is like to have that much to lose. And I think more people struggle with this than they're willing to talk about, and re-engaging with like joy and play and fun and laughter. Like it's actually really hard to do as an adult, and it's really hard to do when you've been hurt and you've experienced loss. And yeah, it seems like it's something that we should have natural access to, and maybe early on we do. You think of like kids, they have access to these things, but the world teaches us to tame them down and to not trust them. And so re-engaging with them really does take a lot of intention and care. So that was beautiful to watch.
Oh, absolutely. And I think too that like as you, especially like, you see like all of these like reels and like things joking about, like oldest child, where's your how's your high functioning anxiety and medical career going, or stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it's meant to be funny and to be relatable, but at the same time I'm just like sitting here looking at that and I'm like, that is so sad. Like it hurts me because I'm that person. I was the high functioning anxiety, very you get sometimes mentally just put in this box where you're like, oh, I have to be serious all the time because this has to get done, or because that has to get done, or because I have this goal. And if I'm not serious all the time, then I'm not going to make it to this goal. And that is just not true. Like, that is the biggest lie that I ever told myself, was that I'm not going to reach my goals if I'm not serious all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really, really hard. Like Kayla can tell you that's really, really hard for me to get to that point, because I was very much like, no, like I have to stay focused on everything that I've got to do, because I don't want to miss something, and I don't want to drop the ball, and I don't want to miss this opportunity, and all of these different things. But then when you sit back and you think about what actually matters to you and what your actual values are and what your true values are, you get to a point where you're like, okay, joy, play, compassion, all of those things are just as important as your goals. And honestly, you can't get to your goals 98% of the time without those things.
Or you'll be really miserable when you
You'll
arrive.
be
Yeah.
completely miserable. And guess what? You're gonna meet Kayla, and then you're gonna join her Burnout to Balance program, and then we're gonna fix all of it, right?
It's so true though. The fun is hard, and that was what burned me out too. It was like this commitment to perfection and progress and growth at all costs, and like hyper responsibility. And like my relationship with fun and play and joy is like so important. I have to prioritize it. Like if I'm not having enough fun now, I can feel it. I'm like, okay, I need to just be goofy and silly. Like there's value in that. It gives our soul a break from all of these problems we've created in our
Yeah.
world. Um,
Amen.
yeah, we need it. It's the soul care.
It's the soul care. I love
Yes.
that from
Yeah.
now on.
Yes. So gosh, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. I'm trying to be mindful of time so that we don't have a super long episode. But I guess one thing I would like to hear a little more about is your process with self-worth and identity, because we've talked a little bit about boundaries and self-care and all of that, but you did a lot of work in getting to know yourself and who you were and what you wanted, and how did that like feel for you? What unfolded for you in your relationship with yourself and how you perceived your worth throughout this?
So I think if I remember correctly, when we talked about this, we talked about how like children, when they go through certain stages in life, they go through a regression before they make their next like leap, whether it's, educate like mental leap or a physical leap, or, you know, something of that nature. And it very much felt that way. Like I felt like when before I joined the program, I was kind of like, mid-level in the stage. And then I feel like I tanked into the pit. And then when I finally, started really doing the work, I like very steadily got out of the pit, was above the mid-level, well above the mid-level, and ended up kind of being exactly where I needed to be. It was like it gets worse before it gets better. And I think that that's very true when you're working on yourself.
Yeah.
Because you have to shovel through all the pain. You have to shovel through all the ugly. You have to shovel through all of the, not so great things about being a human, and realize and think about, well, who do I want to be and how do I get there? And how you get there is you go into the trench and you dig it all out, and then you climb on out, and then you climb up the tree, and then now you're in the tree house looking at your pit, and you're like, all right.
The perspective's a little different afterwards. Yeah.
Look at my beautiful hole that I have. But that's really what it feels like. It feels like, you kind of grow out of that. You like, that's the best way I know how to explain it, is that like, you reflect on it and you're like, you can appreciate the giant hole that you dug for yourself, because it's all of the things that made you who you are, but they're not things that are meant to continue to hold you back. And I think that that's one of the things that people don't think about, is like, if you don't prioritize yourself, and I didn't think about it either. If you don't prioritize yourself and you don't focus on like learning yourself and learning who you want to be versus who you are now and all of those things, then you're just going to have this giant hole that you don't even know is there, that you eventually got to dig out. Because if you don't dig it out and then admire it from the treehouse, then you're going to be in a position where, you're just going to be kind of sleepwalking through your life. And I didn't want to sleepwalk through my life. I would have and I would do it again. I would dig myself another pit, admire my pit from my treehouse, because my treehouse is way better than anything that I ever would have had if I had never dug that hole.
Yeah.
Sorry for my analogies that
I love it. I feel like
it just helps me process it, and just kind of like, because I have this idea in my head about like how I feel about it, but sometimes it's hard to explain it if you don't also feel it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a perfect image, honestly. And it's also the piece that people don't always talk about with like personal growth, healing work, like whether you're deciding to go to therapy or deciding to work with a coach, or just like starting a solo personal growth journey, like whatever approach people are taking, they don't always talk about how it gets a lot harder before you get the good stuff, before you start to feel more joy and more play and things are fun. Like there's some real reckoning moments that are very hard that come. You have to have
you hit
some
a couple rocks while you're digging your hole.
Yeah, it's a little grueling initially, and even throughout. I mean, you're never done. Like you said, the work's not done. We're still doing the work. We're always doing it. It's life, but the perspective, I think, just gets a little better every time we get back to the top of the treehouse. So
Oh yeah. You go down there, you dig a little bit of your hole, and then you decide, 2 feet over there, I think we need another one. You start digging into that one, and then you get up, and then you're admiring your 2 holes, and then eventually, you fill them with, as you grow, you're filling them with things like flowers, and you're filling them with things like, just things that make you happy, and things that are gonna encourage you to continue to want to grow.
Yeah.
You always have to dig a hole before you can plant a seed.
Definitely.
And that's what personal growth is. So
Yeah. Yeah, you have to just trust. You have to trust that it's gonna grow.
gotta go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I love it. Okay, so I know that one of the things you were interested in when we first got started was that this program wasn't just for your work life. It wasn't just professional life, it was both professional and personal. And it's really balanced. I try to do that intentionally because we show up at work as we are, and if we only focus on work, we're gonna miss a lot of stuff. But what were some of the changes you've seen in these different life domains? So if you had to kind of like encompass and reflect on, okay, these are the ways I changed professionally, and these are the way I changed personally, or these are the ways that I healed in these different domains, or ways life looks different now. What are some of the things that you gained through this process?
So I think one of the biggest places that I noticed it for me was how I, not necessarily like work itself, but like how I handled myself at work and with my work-life balance, because I used to not have one. So I started creating one. I started only working 40 to 45 hours a week, as opposed to like the 45 to 50 that I was working prior to when I got burnt out. And then when I got burnt out, hitting 45 was very challenging, but I still had things to do. So I would sometimes push that 50. So I think creating a work-life balance for myself was one of the biggest things that I've seen, like a biggest change for me. So I work, like I said, between 40 and 45 hours a week, and I'm able to be a lot more present when I'm there, a lot more focused when I'm there, which is good. Another thing for me that I think personally, like I've been able to just be kinder to myself,
Mm,
and listening to myself. So listening to when I need an extra hour of sleep, or listening to when I need a mental health day, or listening to when, you know, I'm starving. That was a big one. I did not
yeah.
eat during the day usually because I would just had too many things to do. But now I don't do that anymore. I do eat lunch, which is a great, that's another thing, is that
Yeah.
I eat lunch
That's
every day. That's
huge.
awesome. And then, just like I've noticed just in my marriage, we communicate better. I communicate with my spouse better. We're not perfect, you know. Little tiffs do happen here and there, but for the most part, we just try to be a little bit more graceful with each other, especially going through the renovation. That was rough. Um, but yeah, I think just overall forcing more balance in my life and being kinder to myself. And that includes feeding myself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
those little things we take for granted, we don't always prioritize. It's like back to the basics, right? A lot of self-care is just like making sure our bodies have what they need to get us through the day.
absolutely.
Yeah. It was really beautiful to hear the ways that your dialogue changed and how you talked about things that happen in both life domains. Like just an observation from working with you when you were talking about work stuff at the beginning. It was very different from towards the end where it was like, "This happened. This is how I responded. I realized I was reacting in this way." Like, you were able to really process through things pretty quickly and change your perspective very efficiently and then reflect on it, and even in the moments where maybe it wasn't perfect, you were able to see why and what happened, and that was so cool to witness as opposed to before where I think there was a lot of, like, just frustration and kind of helplessness around some of the things, like just not really knowing where to start. And then with your relationship too, I feel like you were so proactive and like, I communicated this because it needed to be said. And like, you knew you were worth it and you knew your relationship was worth it and that mattered so much to you that it was worth having the hard conversation or, the uncomfortable moment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that, um, you know, perspective is really important. Like just sitting there and just taking the time to really think about it in a different way.
And the reflection and the journaling, like I think being able to have those tools to like process it was helpful for you to make time and space to reflect, because I think you've always had this like really great skill set in this area, but you didn't always give yourself permission to use it on yourself. And that was cool to watch as well.
Yeah, whenever you used to ask me, like there was that one, I will remember the activity probably forever, where you write a letter to your future or to yourself from the future. And I was like bawling by the time we were done with it, because it was so kind, and it was very honest, I think. And I think that ultimately that's what made me realize like how my values had shifted through this program, because like it made me realize that like family is probably the most important thing to me ever. Like my family is everything to me. So not having the time and making the time to invest in my family made me really sad. Like I didn't want to see like my letter from future me to myself now was essentially don't let work or yourself keep you from having the best life you possibly can with your family. And reading it, I think just made it real.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, putting it into words like that already takes a lot, but then saying it out loud and hearing it and saying it, it's like you're receiving the gift and you're offering it at the same time, and it can be very emotional.
yeah, it was rough.
I remember you were like, well, I'm more emotional reading it than I was writing it. Like,
Yeah.
you actually got to receive the wisdom. So yeah. So it's been like what, over 2 months since you graduated, something around there? 2 months-ish, month and a half? I don't know.
I think it's like closer to a month and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's been a while since we've connected. What's been going on with you since you've completed the program? How are you continuing to apply the stuff that you learned in your life now?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I've applied probably recently is just taking time for myself and listening to myself. So those are two really big things that I think that I've continued to really focus on that. And I haven't been doing too great at the managing the anxiety part of that. So I need to start working on that again, and continue to work on that. But for the most part, I think I've been doing pretty well with listening to like what I need, what my body needs, what my husband needs, like just like my needs and what I ultimately want for my family. So just kind of focusing on a lot of that right now.
Yeah.
So as far as struggling with stuff,
Yeah, I was gonna say that was gonna be my
I
next
figure that's
question.
probably your next question, because I know how this goes, Kayla.
Yeah.
Um, so I think like what I've probably struggled with the most has been letting go. Like just like especially with work, because I have some pretty intense deadlines right now. So just like letting myself go, like letting it go, like not taking it personally, not like over stressing about it, because you know, I work in R&D, and R&D is not perfect. It's a roller coaster. There's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs. Things work great for 3 minutes and then they don't work so great 6 minutes after that, or whatever. Like it's constantly twists and turns. So just not taking that personally and recognizing that I am one human being and I cannot do everything. That's probably been the biggest challenge for me, I think. That and not beating myself up for not having my house together yet. Those are two things that I think that I've struggled with pretty significantly lately.
Yeah. And there's always going to be like a new challenge, right? And I think the letting go one and the not being hard on yourself one are both very, very common. I mean, I have invested my whole life to this work and I still struggle with both of those. So it's like you never get a point of completion. But now that you have these frameworks and these tools, like how are you planning to show up for yourself with these areas that you can see you still need some care in?
So I think, we were just talking a little bit today about how like I was looking at my future and kind of like what I want for my future. And I think with some of those things that I'm considering, some of the things that the next steps that I'm going to be taking for my future um, have significantly helped how I mentally process things. It's like really like it seems like such a big thing now. Like in the moment, it seems like such
Mm,
a big deal. But then at the same time, it's like, you always have to recognize that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You have to, just it's like it's rewiring how you think.
yeah.
And I think my biggest thing is that I'm going to be doing a lot of there's light at the end of the tunnel. This isn't forever. It's not always going to be this way. And just focusing on that. And with the house stuff, it's just I need to remind myself that, just take a little bit of time every day and it'll get there.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to happen tomorrow. It doesn't have to happen yesterday. Like just take your time and enjoy the fact that you have your own space to decorate and make yours. So I'm just trying to stay in the enjoying the
Yeah.
process part of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, enjoy it and trust it. I love that. And it's good reminders too, because I think we're all so hurried to get where we're going. And I mean, it's good to hold the big perspectives that come with thinking about our futures and to be able to recognize like every little thing. Like, is it really going to matter in 5 years? If not, maybe we're thinking a little too much about it. But also, like, how do we just enjoy what we have and where we're at and know that like the destination isn't something we have to rush to. Like, we're going to get there when we're meant to be there.
exactly, exactly. And I think that was probably one of the hardest things too. Like, if I had to pick like another hard thing for me, it was just like I was always just like a go, go, go. Like, you graduate high school and then you go to college and you get your degree and then you get your good job and then you get married and then you buy a house and then you have babies. And I remember it was like a whole thing, like after we had bought our house, I was like, Kayla, I'm not ready for the next step. So I feel completely lost because our fur babies are enough for us right now. We don't worry for human babies. So, it's like I felt very lost because I had always been on that grind. Like, been on that grind, like, working towards the next thing, working towards the next thing. Then when I got to a point where the next thing was literally terrifying. I was like, well, what do I do now? And then I just kind of lost my mind a little bit.
I think we all have those moments, but especially those of us that are like achievement oriented and progress oriented and kind of like perfectionistic. I think most people listen to the podcast can relate to a lot of those qualities. Like there's this desire to just keep chasing the next thing, but you get tired eventually. And sometimes the next thing isn't what you thought it was. Like sometimes the next thing is to stop for a second and reflect and get your bearings again and rebuild a stronger foundation for yourself. Like it's not always about moving forward. Sometimes it's about going within, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I learned that the hard way, I think, but I'm
Same.
like way better on the other end for it. So,
Yeah, that's what matters. In conclusion, so I have a few questions I kind of want to ask in kind of like a rapid fire type of way. So I want to have you reflect a little bit on like the overall process you went through and give some advice, but like just whatever pops up first. And I've got like just a handful of questions I want to ask as we get close to the end. So are you in?
Yeah, let's do
Okay.
it.
Okay. So if you had to like pinpoint one thing, what was the most valuable aspect of the coaching experience?
Oh, that's hard. I think for me, it would have to be a tie between the self-care and the Enneagram.
Mm,
Like for me, because those two for me are very connected. So like just the relationship between those two things is just insane.
yeah. Yeah, like learning to know yourself and then how to care for yourself with that knowledge of who you are and what you need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that for me it was intense, but it was fantastic. Like it was wonderful.
Yeah. What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who is experiencing burnout right now?
Don't beat yourself up because you're gonna let yourself down if you do that. Like just don't beat yourself up. Don't take out your burnout. Don't take it out on yourself. Like be kind
Mm,
because burnout is something, it's not something to be ashamed of. A lot of people, more people experience burnout, especially now, than, you throw a nickel and you hit somebody who's probably burnt out. And so the biggest thing is just to be kind to yourself and don't make yourself miserable because of it.
mm.
Like you're already miserable because you're burnt out. Don't
Right.
worse
Yeah, don't
by
add to it.
beating yourself up over being burnt out because it
Yeah.
will do no good.
Yeah.
I can tell you from experience, it will do you no good.
What would you tell somebody who is considering coaching? Is there anything you would tell someone who'd never gone through a coaching experience to help them decide if it was good for them or not?
I would tell them, of course, 100%, I would 100,000% recommend to do it. But I would also tell them, don't do it unless you're willing to put in the work.
Mm,
Because I think sometimes people go into something like this and expect to just be given all the answers and the problems to be solved. So my biggest thing would be, you know, I would fully recommend it to anybody, whether you're experiencing burnout, whether it's pre-burnout, whether it's post-burnout, like I would definitely recommend it 100%, but don't do it unless you're going to be willing to put in the work because then you're going to be disappointed because you didn't get what you thought that you were going to get out of it because you didn't take the time to really invest in it.
yeah.
And that's a disservice to yourself. So that's what I would say. I know that's a
Yeah.
little harsh, but
No, that's honestly amazing advice. And it's true. Like, if you're not ready to do the work, coaching doesn't matter because coaching isn't someone telling you what to do or solving your problems for you. It's like you digging in and doing the work on yourself with a supportive person
yeah,
alongside you. So you got to do the heavy lifting. And if you're not ready for that, then yeah, it's probably not going to turn out the way you
not
want it to.
time. Yeah, it's not your time.
Yeah, I love
So,
that. How has your perspective on the personal growth and healing process changed for you over these last few months?
well, my perspective on like self-care is just completely different. Like, I don't think it's selfish. I think it's important. I think it's essential to having a healthy lifestyle. I think personal growth, I've always had a very high um opinion of investing in personal growth and any sort of growth in general, like, investing in yourself, whether it's leadership, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, like all of the things are I love it. I think it's so important. But I think my understanding of it is very different. So like I've always, valued it, but I never really realized how important it is. Like I respected it and I was like, I think that it's important. I would love to invest in myself and, learn new things, whatever, but it wasn't like I went all in.
Mm.
So I think I see more value in it than I did, for sure, in both personal growth and self-care.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta be willing to put in the time. And I don't think people always realize like it's not just a nice to have. It's like if you want to move towards the life you want, like we have to. We have to
Yeah.
be willing to do this work. It's like an essential quality to a fully lived life, but we don't always consider it that way.
No, 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 no. No one, I can't think of anybody in like my personal like friendship circle who would describe self-care and personal growth that way.
Yeah.
So until, I have that conversation with them and they're like, oh, like that's wild.
Yeah, you'll get to be the one to share all the wisdom now. Um
I don't know
looking
about that, but
Oh, you've got the wisdom now. Like, I have been so impressed throughout this conversation. Like, I knew you were soaking it in, but every time I talk to you, I'm just so amazed at how much you trust yourself and your experiences and your belief in yourself is it's so inspiring, so empowering. I want to ask you a couple of questions about like your future. So, what are you excited about looking forward at your life now that you've done some of this foundational work? What's making you feel excited personally, professionally, in general?
I think like personally, I'm excited about the fact that like I'm now like more open to like a lot of the emotions and feelings and particularly the positive ones that I never really allowed myself to feel before. And honestly, that's been really nice. Like that's been a huge blessing on my life is
Yeah.
being able to feel all of those things. So like personally that, and then personally like being able to invest in my marriage in a healthy way and be able to communicate with my spouse in a healthy way and set boundaries in a healthy way with like family and all of those things. I think like I'm really excited to be able to personally like apply everything that I've learned. And professionally, I'm just excited for clarity. Like I know, who I want to be. I know what I want to do, how I want to move forward in my career. And that's something that has always been a real, like, I've always known exactly what I wanted to do. But I think having a different perspective and having the clarity and really listening to myself and trusting myself has really helped with thinking about my future and being excited about it. It's been a long time since I've been really excited about my future and like what it holds for not only me, but my family. So.
Yeah. Ugh, I love that. How do you plan to keep the progress going? What's your what are your plans to just like keep doing this work, keep investing in yourself?
So, one thing that, Kayla and I had talked about is we'll probably still meet like once a month just so that I can maintain and keep myself accountable. And plus, I love talking to Kayla. So, we have a great time together.
We
Um,
do.
so, I want to just continue to invest in that relationship because I think it's important, it's valuable. Kayla talks about how much I've grown, but I just really like appreciate her and I value her so much. She has invested so much, not just through the program and the content in the program, but then outside of the program. Me and her talked. We talked once a week in the program, but then we also talked at least two other times in the week, just, catching up, talking about challenges and ups and downs and just I can't express enough how grateful I am for her investment as well. It definitely took a team here to make the progress and to put in the work. So I will continue to meet with Kayla, but the other things that I'm just going to continue to do is prioritize that personal time, prioritize the time with my family, and really focus on my values. So that'll be another very important.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I love the values work because you can constantly return to it and get like new wisdom from it and new alignment from it. And also I'm glad that you stopped sharing the nice things about me because I was about to bust down in tears, Emerald. You know I'm sentimental.
oh my
I'm like, I'm gonna cry. You're being too
God.
sweet. But it's been so much fun. I love our relationship and getting to know you, and it's definitely mutually beneficial. I get to learn alongside you. That's part of the beauty of it. So yeah, it's definitely a partnership. It's a team effort. Um,
Go team.
what? Yeah. Okay, last question. What are your biggest hopes for your future as far as feeling fulfilled and investing in your well-being? What are the things that just make you feel hopeful and inspired?
I think honestly, being able to truly trust myself.
Mm.
Like that was something that I had never really actually felt before. So like being able to feel that and being able to know that like I'm doing exactly what I need to be doing when I need to be doing it. And I'm not perfect. Like I'm not always going to get it right, but just to being able to like really listen to myself and like my hopes for my future is just being able to really invest in what matters to me, which is ultimately my family. Like, I think my career is important. I think being a professional is, a big part of who I am, but I don't want that to be everything that I am.
Yeah.
So, really focusing on, what's important to me and what is really valuable. So,
Yeah. Yeah, listening to that voice and trusting that you already know what you need, whether or not you're ready to listen yet.
yes. Yes, exactly.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I I'm so grateful to you, so honored for this conversation. I feel like we've gone everywhere. It was a beautiful recap for me too of like your journey through the program. We went some places that I wasn't sure we were gonna go, and I think this is just gonna be so valuable for the people listening because my audience it's primarily women, primarily experiencing stress, burnout, or just like trying to figure out a balance in navigating life. Like this is not easy. It's hard. We're all looking for some depth and some meaning and some hope. And I think being able to hear your experiences and the way that you've just really turned towards yourself in this process is going to inspire and uplift everybody that's listening. So I'm so grateful to you for coming on and being willing to be like vulnerable in a very public platform. Really appreciate that. And it's just been fun hanging out with you for the hour. So thank you so much. Is there any final things you want to say before we say goodbye?
No, I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I really hope that, if one person gets something really positive out of this, like I would just be so grateful for that. I really hope that, the one thing that I will say is that don't be afraid to take a chance on yourself. Like
Mm.
it's so much more important than anyone really thinks that it is. Like, just don't be afraid to take that chance to invest in yourself. As the that's like the last thing that I would say.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
thank you for having me.
Of course, it's been so much fun. I knew we were gonna have a blast, but like the time has just flown by. It's been so much fun. So thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone that's listening. I hope that you use this as an opportunity to reflect on where you're at. If there's anything in Emerald's story that resonated with you, like, spend some time with it, dig in. We always talk about different practices and strategies. Emerald has shared some today. We talk about different things you could do on every episode. So it's always a good opportunity to think about what do you need today? What do you need to reflect on today? Take something home with you from this. Don't leave it in the car or on your walk or wherever you're listening. Make it real in your life and take good care of yourselves. I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening. If you want more resources on thriving in your life or want details on working with me, check out my website at internallyguidedleadership.com or follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Internally Guided Coach. Be gentle with yourselves out there, and I'll talk to you next time.